Hello and welcome to another Future of the Fortress video. These are the videos where I read the Bay 12 Games Dwarf Fortress Q&As on the Bay 12 forums. If you would like to take part in these Q&As yourself, there's a link down to the actual forum thread in the description of this video. And if you would like to ask questions and maybe get them read on this show, you can do that there. I haven't read every single question because some of them are repeats and some of them are very technical. So if you want to see the full thread, feel free to read through the thread yourself. That being said, if you don't like the sound of my reading, that's kind of the entire video, so good luck with that. Last thing I want to say is for this one, and I want some feedback on this, I'm going to also read the monthly report that Zach and Tarn put out every month, which is just kind of an update on Bay 12 itself instead of strictly Q&As. If you don't want me to include this in the next one, let me know in the comments section. I'd like to know whether or not you think it's a good addition. Anyway, let's dive right into the reading. Starting off with mission status from Thrito, and he says, "We were in need, and you came through. We appreciate it, past, present, and future. You never know when you'll have to use these generous gifts you've saved for a rainy day, and it's gratifying to know you see value in what we are doing, and was and will be doing. You can rest easy knowing that we will keep hammering away, rapidly finishing the phase and moving on to the greater future. In present, we are perfecting the game experience and balance. In the past, we have toiled to bring that possibility into actuality. In the days to come, all will make sense and bring joy for untold human being hours, all across and up and down the fourth dimension. We make sure the reality you experience is objective and beyond quality. Congratulations to the generous, Thrito." Followed by Tarn Adams and his Fun with Numbers, aka Toady One, says, "Thanks to everybody that helped out." And that's lots of people. This is the one PayPal chunk, and the Patreon chunk will start showing up next month. With those together, we should be able to cruise on down to the finish line now. This month, we're going to try our best to get out of Stage 2, usability and tutorials, etc. Though, there's always room to improve usability once we start bug fixing at full speed. Now let's see if I can get the settings menu completed. So now right beneath, you can see their monthly financials. May was the month where they put out a cry for help, and Kotaku stepped forward with an article, as well as many members of the community, as well as the subreddits and the discords. Everybody kind of got together and threw money at Bay 12, and I just wanted to say that is a very obvious improvement, and it's lovely to see Zach and Tarn resting easy, at least for the next couple of months. And now we move on to the Future of the Fortress Q&A, and we start off with a question from Sammy Limix. I think that's how you say that. "Does breaking into the caverns still essentially destroy your FPS? I remember the game losing a ton of FPS back in the day if you broke into them, and it was one of the reasons you didn't want to do that. Has this already been mitigated? And am I so stuck in my head in the old ways that I never realized it? Will the Steam release include performance fixes for these sorts of common FPS losses?" Before I respond with Tarn's response, I just want to say that yes, this has been mitigated a long time ago, and it's to do with webs. And Tarn's response is, "We haven't observed this, and I'm not sure what it would be. Something to do with webs and looms? Question mark?" The next question comes in from Fantastic Dwarf, and they say, "More questions about the irritation mechanic. 1. Is it the behavior attacked to a token on a creature, such as some giant animals through CVEs, or an always present environmental hazard? And does it apply to the naked wilderness animal people as we know it already? Though I would be surprised if animal people above ground were united into their own civ group alongside of subterranean people, given the extreme variety. Much least that mean an expansion of the entity file or some hard-coded function. I don't want to get the idea that a sudden stampede of irritated rhinos can be misinterpreted as a pseudo-siege, but there is getting a slight perceptive disparity over what irritation means, and its participants, with your ostrich example of mundane animals as an overall mechanic. But maybe I'm just overthinking it." And Tarn's response is, "I think it applies to any above-ground wilderness population creature. And the above-ground animal people don't have entities or anything, they get hit with it as well." The next question comes in from Brewer Bob, and they say, "With the internal menus for settings coming, will we still be able to change the settings in d_init.txt and init.txt and other such files? I'm personally more comfortable with editing the settings with a text editor, so I'm curious to know if this option will still be available." And Tarn's response is, "These types of files should still exist, yeah. I'll have to save the settings changes people make, and that can just be in text. I'm not sure if it'll end up in a separate file, etc. The next question comes in from Squamos, and they say, will both versions of the game receive the same updates other than graphics, UI, and mouse support and stuff? And Tarn's response is, once we get Classic ready, yeah. It's all the same code base, so everything that isn't a menu needing adaptation comes for free. And once the number of menus needing adaptation isn't the whole game, I should be able to keep up with that for every release as well. The new vanilla music and art are premium only, of course. Another question from Sammy, and they say, does premium version have tools like this? For example, if I can designate a bedroom and then copy and paste it a few times, then that will be faster than the keyboard controls currently are, once they are dug out. Can I then place all the room's furniture I need and then copy and paste those into other bedrooms? I don't want you to actually just become a clone of other games, but all these other games have quality of life features for a reason. And Tarn's response is, I mentioned blueprints last month as something on the table, but we don't have anything like this yet. Building placement definitely needs a bit more help. The next one is a very text-heavy one from Brahms, so I will do my best to read it clearly. And Brahms says, are there any plans for updating stockpile settings to either allow stockpile priorities from important high, medium, and low defaults and medium, for example, similar to RimWorld and other games, and change and allow stockpiles from both give and take and other linked or any to allowing individual link/any options for either give or take? Example, main storage stockpile is set to give and take from all and is linked to give to bar stockpile 1. Workshops such wouldn't be prohibited from taking from the main storage stockpile without a main link to the stockpile. I bring this up because having a low-priority central general stockpile has obvious benefits, allowing you to set up a more targeted higher-priority stockpiles elsewhere. It would make sense for a stockpile links to override priority settings. If option 1 is not available, then I bring in option 2, because it would be useful to have a central general stockpile and occasionally link new, more targeted stockpiles to it somewhere else without limiting everything else from taking from the central general stockpile. At the moment, once you've introduced one linked stockpile, you're essentially forced to establish links to every workshop or either stockpile that would have otherwise had access to the central general stockpile, making it an all or nothing choice, which can cost someone a lot of time depending on the amount of workshops that might use that central general stockpile. Take a shot every time they wrote central general stockpile. Don't, you'd die. I think this is an area of opportunity that would benefit from some type of polish for future users. And Tarn's response is, there's been a number of different suggestions about this over the years. I'm worried about CPU load with priorities, where every item in every stockpile would be more potentially restless about its storage. And item storage is already troublesome for CPU-wise as is. It feels doable with some kind of under-the-hood management system orchestrating it, making something other than auto-links everywhere, but it would be a larger project. On the other hand, adding some extra options for how links work versus workshops taking from piles seems more manageable, unless I'm missing something. The next question comes in from Buttery Mess, and they say, will it be possible to turn off tooltips? I've been wondering this one myself. And Tarn's response is, that's not in there now, but it would be quick to set up. I'll keep it in mind for this settings stuff I'm about to start. The next is kind of a double feature from Volleylol and Eric Blank, and they say, starting with Volleylol's question, what was the nature of the bug tipped by Putnam? And will the fix have a visible footprint on the in-game cultures, i.e., will there be fewer and more books in a given world, or some properties of the former being rarer/more common? And then Eric Blank's question, which is, does the book change imply authors in world generation will spend less time reading books or less time writing books about books? Necromancer towers can often contain books about the writing of a book that details the history of a book, which is a rebuttal of a book about the author. And all the same author. We could really do with some books on what they think of the meaning of life and death is magical theory or something. Though it's far more myth and magic update. With the improved word selector, are we looking at additions to vocabulary and symbols lists again? Or a workaround that's lets them choose an off-topic vocabulary. And do you and KitFox have a plan to deal with Steam mods that might contain adult content, like the words you removed some time ago, nude, mods, and cow women milking and manure, etc.? You know it's going to happen. And Tarn's response was, it was authoring the various books that needed historical information about the author. They went over the totality of the history too often, and the history is always growing. So I was troubled at first that it wasn't specifically an art form related, but the World Gen Times proved that this was the big block. It's possible that the authors no longer attempted books when art was turned off because of the various writing forms and some of their linkages to other art stuff, but I'm not really sure. Any changes to books should be unnoticeably subtle, and for certain authors will still go over all of the history, but they keep track of where they left off and cache a larger number of events they'd like to write about. It was the repeat authors that were the real culprit. Once an author has been involved in hundreds of events, it starts overwriting the cache based on importance, but most authors don't get that number of events in their lives, so it's just not going to affect anything. Or if it does, it would mean that the authors with super eventful lives on lots of stuff that's important, which is an improvement, but it would really take a lot of events to be noticeable. The zanier books about stuff that isn't important to us anyway, will still be frequent. And the improvised word selector thing is still there as far as I know, and I don't know what the deal is. We haven't talked about the mod moderation with KitFox yet. I know Steam has tags for adult content and permits all manner of matter. I'm not sure if they'll want to have a say as well. Question comes in from Techie Tanius, and they say, are blade scabbards planned for the future? And if so, would they be able to go on one's hip or waist, or a more realistic, for longer weapons at least, than on the upper body? And Tarn's response is, I think we mentioned them somewhere in the vastness of notes, but I'm not sure when. The current strapped stuff supports the upper body, and water skins gets stuffed in the pants and such. So, if there's some precedent of floating around for various configurations, which might be possible. Question comes in from Lexi, and they say, to clarify regarding designations, does this mean that a mouse only or WASD plus mouse designation method would be the default, with the traditional keyboard only approach having a way to be enabled for players who prefer that method? And Tarn's response is, something like that, yeah. More generally, when I get to the other menus, I'm not sure if there will be any universal way to opt to keyboard selectors, etc. That you won't have to invoke over and over, just once seems preferable. The next question comes in from WereDragon, and they say, how are you holding up, given what is probably a lot of stress? Do you worry that the game will not be received well? Are you drinking enough water? And Tarn's response is, this question was asked before June got especially bad. I don't know, wasn't a great month, but I'm still here. The game's always been weird, but I think it'll be okay. Water every day, possibly enough. The next question comes in from Pilbo, and they say, will we be able to click and drag round rectangular shapes for constructions and designations a la MS Paint? Is there a reason you're not doing pre-sales to boost your income for the time being? And Tarn's response is, I haven't added brush shapes yet. I don't know that we'll get to that at first, but it's certainly possible to do that kind of thing now. My second-hand understanding is that pre-sales are only permitted for large companies that Steam knows are capable of paying the pre-sale money back if something unexpected happens. But I don't remember where I heard that. I don't recall ever seeing an indie game with pre-sales, but I might be wrong. Things are fine now in any case. The community has responded resoundingly and decided to keep us afloat. Brewer Bob has a question, and they say, there was some mentions that the Z-status screen is changing earlier, which reminded me of some not-so-DF-related things I've been wanting to ask. Did you possibly intentionally or subconsciously choose the Z key as for the status screen because it was used in the Ultima series, ZTATs? Stats? How am I supposed to say that? I don't know. And I think some other old CRPGs. Speaking of Ultima, you've mentioned that they've influenced you in world building, so my question, do you have a favorite Ultima game, or which one influenced you the most? And Tarn's response was, ZTAT. You know, I played Ultima back in the day. This is me kind of jumping in here. I've never tried to read that like a word. It was always just stats to me in my brain. Anyway, yeah, stats. I don't remember specifically if that's what we were thinking since it's been so long ago, but it seems likely. I was certainly aware and can still visually command coming up in the corner cursor area on the lower right. Let's see, we've played Ultima 3 to 8 and the 2 underworlds and the dinosaur one, but not the Mars one. My favorite is 4 because it was so different from anything before. The improvements from 5 to 7 were pretty inspirational in terms of how the world was becoming more interactive, and the first underworld has a really striking claustrophobic survival atmosphere that I haven't felt recaptured in any game I've played since, though I haven't played a lot of the new survival style games. Another question from Sammy, and they say, is there going to be a more user-friendly animal stocks page? I would like to be able to sort them by name, type, etc. But in the current Dwarf Fortress version, they are all in a giant list by join date, which is kind of pointless and hard to figure out what you have. And Tarn's response is, the current pets and livestock info mostly does this. Name sorting works, though the type part is weird and broken right now. The next question comes from an Obsidian short sword, and they say, will there ever be randomly generated martial arts? Will dwarven children ever play spar with each other and get combat experience? And Tarm's response was, yeah, we have some specific plans for generated martial arts, and it was even kinda sorta in Armok 1, but we haven't gotten back around to those in all these years. If we added child play sparring, I have no idea how much it should actually count. Another question from Volleylol, and they say, have artists recovered enough of the art to do a showcase video anytime soon? I found these were both very enjoyable and gave a clear image of how the UI worked in practice. And Tarn's response is, we're not there yet. They aren't working on any new stuff until the video needed art is redone. So we'll really be doing videos again as soon as possible. There's just an awful lot to replace. Another question from the sponsor of the show, Fantastic Dwarf, seems like it at this point, and they say, question regarding the groundwork of religious hunting orders. Will they avoid forming in the death religion, or will an alternative explanation like ethical legality on necromancy and night creatures be introduced to motivate their behaviors? Since the main proprietor of Give or Take Slabs, creating devoted followers who raise and destroy the undead, is the god itself as the source. Seems good for making bodies, but I'm not sure for a clear view of what the sphere would now represent. And Tarn's response is, we've tried at times to tie the spheres to justifications, as with the releasing of demons, by all sorts of spheres, for a variety of reasons. So hopefully we'd be able to provide an actual justification for many things happen that when it comes to opposing necromancers in various ways. Obviously there's the practical reason of not wanting the world to be dead, but it's good to go beyond that, even if as it relates to the intelligent undead becoming poets or whatever and figuring out what is going on with society after all. Maybe some of them will be cool with that. Now a quick four-parter from Urist McSaddist, and they say, right now, necromancers can attack your fort at any time. If you are close enough, is that intentional? 2. What are the changes to the traps we can expect before magic? 3. Will mothers stop bringing their babies to battle in the near future? God, I hope not. And 4. Do you plan to implement proper civil wars? And if yes, when would that be? And Tarn's response is, yeah, it's set up like that. Though we've changed the sizes and some of the ramp-up formulas now, they don't have a reliable entity definition, so the regular trigger system doesn't apply to them. That's in regards to towers. 2, the idea that a simple hallway setup shouldn't be able to stop every siege will be messing with this stuff to accomplish this. I'm not sure if that means leaning more towards AI changes rather than the map changes to trap mechanics, but the big stuff we wanted to do with traps has to wait for the map rewrite. 3, probably not, though we've taken into consideration all the various ideas surrounding childcare and hope to get that in sometime before the far future. 4, the avenue we've considered is far more recently with the coup stuff. We have for the villain release. The claimant stuff from before has never panned out, and I'm not sure when it'll be revisited. Internal civil war discussion also came up when we were looking at the stress code and miserable forts, but I'm not sure. Over the course of the army stuff, which is happening after the release gets cleaned up and villains get sorted, there will be a lot of new army and UI mechanisms. And things will become tempting from various directions. I suspect, especially if the player is given a freer hand to mess about with their own civ. Question comes in from Lord L, and they say, so the question is, have you ever thought about playing as an intelligent magical artifact? And Tarn's response is, we have various odd notes, some regarding what sorts of objects generally we'd want to allow, and I remember one weird brainstorming triangle averaging between items and creatures and landforms, trying to capture as many possibilities as we can, so that the code can remain future-proof. But I don't recall specifically if we considered intelligent items as a player option. We'd certainly have considered them as a thing. Waiting at the bottom of a river for 2,500 years seems like it would kind of, need some kind of speed-up option. Anyway. And now another question from Sammy Linux, who's rapidly becoming a main character of this episode, and they say, does this new version address the super annoying issue of all military dwarves losing their assigned rooms every time you send them on a mission? And Tarn's response is, not yet. There are a lot of bugs to fix. A question comes in from Clinodev, and they say, are the changes to farming depth-based, or specifically surface and soil cavern-based? And have there been changes to farming that make irrigated stone plots and on arbitrary levels less effective? Encouraging players to dig a little deeper is lovely, but not at the expanse of the deep plots that provide for the dwarven wine drank by the master smiths working at the magma forges just above the lowest levels when they take their rest. In this general context, I've also been asked by hill dwarves, will the changes make actual outdoor plant surface farming less effective? And Tarn's response is, yeah, it requires actual cavern surface. I have been contemplating ways to allow people to farm elsewhere, while still requiring some subsurface contact. This could involve, say, a soil gathering zone to place and improve a plot elsewhere, or something to do with irrigation. It's not just that we want people to dig a little deeper, we want the caverns to matter at all. Without several changes, they might as well just be walled up whenever you find them, which is really not great. Also, notable underground poor soil farms work, they just aren't as good, and have to be much bigger to function as before. Outdoor plant farming is unchanged. And a question comes in from Dick Butt DeGrat, and they say, are there any plans to improve the state of dwarven rancidivism in the game? I see that there are changes being made to the current stress system. Will any of these improve matters? A dwarf that gets thrown into prison for starting fights will likely only get worse while in prison, no matter how crazy and expensive and ritzy you make said prison. Sometimes they improve, but yeah, it's quite rare. And Tarn's response is, the stress system has changed a lot. My impression is that the situations like this in general can be handled a little better now, but they still won't be like being in prison all that much. And another question comes in from Clinodev, and they say, have you considered asking, do you want to do the tutorial question at the beginning of World Gen, locking the default tutorial experience to a reasonable settings and like small and short, would go a long way towards discouraging the standard new player impulse to say, I have a decent computer, let's choose the large and very long, heck, all max settings, which leads to a frustratingly long World Gen. Edit, the Necromancer Death Worlds, and so on. And Tarn's response is, I don't know, this feels like a little too much. Attaching the tutorial to World Gen, though I'm not sure why, maybe it's a bad idea overall. I have some warnings on these options, and the ones which cause World Gen to take longer than a minute. Though, I'm sure some people will ignore them. And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Future of the Fortress readings. If you enjoyed these videos and you want to see more of them, I've actually done a whole year's worth of them, so you can just listen to me slowly get better at reading as I read along. Shoutouts to everybody who supported Bay 12 in the past month, and I'm looking forward to seeing that Patreon increase as well on their reports for next year. If you want me to continue covering the reports, please comment down below this video. And if you want to support me and my antics of covering Bay 12 and everything Dwarf Fortress, as well as other interesting content surrounding that, give this YouTube channel a subscription, because I do these every month. And I also do updates on the Steam version of Dwarf Fortress, which I have a huge playlist of over 100 videos now, and those are continuing to release periodically. And to anybody who supports this channel, if you want to do that directly on the bottom of this video, you can do that through super thanks or super chats if this happens to be a premiere. And if you want to support me directly, you can do that through my Patreon, patreon.com/BLINDIRL. You can see my patrons on the screen right now. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you again in the next one.